I love to tell stories. So on this episode of The Couch, I thought I'd share my method in 10 quick tips. Ever since I was a child, I have been telling stories. I think the first story I ever told was when I was just 5 years old, and I got the Super Squirrel toy for Christmas, and I ran around the room and pretended it could fly and shoot laser beams out of its eye. But since then, I've been telling all sorts of tales: Raccoon Head John, Frog and Butterfly, and I think that I'm pretty good at it at this point. At least I hope so. So, I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and share my method with you all here today. And I should mention that while this is a controversial topic, I do think I found the concrete rules to this. But in order to share the first rule, we're actually going to have to leave the couch for a moment. If you'll just follow me.
Number 10.
The outdoors are a great place to come up with ideas and really think about your story. It's one of the reasons why I think people from the country tell better tales than people from the city. It's actually kind of cold out here. I think I'm going to go inside now.
Number 9.
We all have political opinions. At least I know that I do. But they have no place in storytelling. Now, there are a few exceptions to this. For instance, if you're doing a satire, if you're doing a fact-based work. But in most cases, they're just boring. And besides, 100 years from now, things like immigration and abortion might not be all that important. So try to do more universal themes, like love, courage, honor. And remember that the political opinion of today is not necessarily the political opinion of tomorrow.
Number 8.
I know it might not seem like it, but exercise is actually very important for storytelling. Be sure to exercise at least an hour a day. Although, I might take a break.
Number 7.
Sketching characters is no big deal. I like to do it in 2 questions. The first one I ask myself is, what is my character like? Are they a happy character? Are they a sad character? Are they an evil character? And the second question is, how are they different from that personality? For instance, if they're a happy character, when are they sad? If they are a good character, when are they evil? Scrooge McDuck is a perfect example for me. In most cases, he's just a greedy duck. But he does like to win his money fairly. My final suggestion, don't be afraid to give your characters quirks.
Number 6.
Kurt Vonnegut once said that you should tell stories for yourself. And he's right about this. But there's something more that should be said. It's not just that you're telling stories for yourself, it's that you're the kind of person people will want to hear stories from. You should mold your characters so that all sorts of different people will want to listen to you. My final suggestion is, don't just tell stories, be a story.
Number 5.
The number 3 constantly seems to come up when you're telling stories. I guess it makes perfect sense. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. But I can't help but think there's more to it. Whatever the case, if you're thinking of using the number 3, my suggestion is, go for it.
Number 4.
On the subject of plot, I personally like my plots to strike me like a bolt of lightning. I have no trouble with them. I just come up with them on the spot. But a lot of creators have trouble with them. So I came up with this formula to help you out. So the first thing you want to do is intrigue. You're going to want to get your audience interested in the story. Very important at the beginning. Then you're going to want to present a rational explanation. This is something a lot of creators forget. Just something that makes complete sense, but the rest of your story goes out of its way to destroy this rational explanation. Until finally you arrive at the third conflict, where you are going to also present the discovery. that your character is going to make, and this will probably concern the rational explanation, although that is not a rule. And finally, the resolve, where everything works out and your character just discovers what life is really like. And I should mention that you're not always going to want to follow this plot. Your stories can get really boring if you do. Don't do that. But it's an important thing to keep in mind.
Number 3.
For a lot of these, I will admit that I could be wrong about them. You know, storytelling is a very complicated subject, and no one really knows what makes a good story. But for these last 3, I consider them the golden rules. And the first one is, do not use pop culture references. I know a lot of shows and movies do this, like South Park, The Simpsons, and the movie Airplane. But face it, very few of us remember Honey Boo Boo or an old commercial from the 80s. And it just confuses people that will be watching it 100 years from now. Try to make your stories immortal. Try to make them identifiable for any place or any time.
Number 2.
Hard work should be rule number 1. It's not quite, but it's almost. And it's really not that big of a deal. Trust me, you'll get used to it as you continue, but if you were expecting not to do any work in this business, well, I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Number 1.
And the final, and most important rule is, always try to tell a good tale. And I know this sounds simple, but believe me, professionals and even myself make this mistake all the time. It's easy when you're telling a story to say to yourself, I can make an exception here, or this part can be bad. But trust me, you're not going to want to do that. Every part of your story should be as good as you can make it. And if you ever have any doubts, just don't do it. Trust me, it's not worth it. So, in the end, I feel like if you can follow this rule, you will be a good storyteller. Well, there you go. Those are the rules to make you a great storyteller. And it's important to mention that your main goal here is going to be to convince a wide range of people that you know what you're doing, that your story is good. And people aren't going to want to admit that. They're going to want to say that your story sucks and that you suck. We live in an age of critics today. But what I always like to keep in mind is that anyone can be a critic, but it takes true courage to be a creator. Now doesn't it? Good luck out there. And finally, some story recommendations. Book-wise, there's Don Quixote, The Brothers Karamazov, The Jungle Tales of Tarzan. Movies, The Artist, The Thief of Baghdad, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Plays, Harvey, Hamlet, The Death of the Salesman. There's plenty of stuff out there.